The ridiculous Finnish tank that mounted a British howitzer on 18 stolen Soviet chassis. Imagine being so desperate for armored firepower that you bolt a 40-year-old British artillery piece onto a stolen Soviet tank chassis designed for speed, not heavy guns. The turret was too small, the gun was too big, the ammunition didn't exist, and the whole contraption could barely turn without toppling over. This was the BT-42, Finland's most absurd contribution to World War II tank design. 18 of them rolled off the assembly line. None of them should have worked, and by the end, their fatal flaw would be written in the smoking wreckage of Finland's last desperate armored offensive. The year is 1941. Finland has just entered what history will call the Continuation War, fighting alongside Germany against the Soviet Union. It sounds like Finland is the aggressor, but the Finns see it differently. Just 2 years earlier, Stalin's Red Army invaded Finland in the Winter War, demanding territory, expecting an easy victory. They got neither. The Finns fought back with ski troops, Molotov cocktails, and a handful of obsolete tanks. They lost the war, but not their pride, and they lost 11% of their territory. Now in 1941, Finland wants it back. But there's a problem. Finland has almost no modern tanks. Their entire armored force is a museum collection. Renault FT-17S from 1918. Vickers 6-ton tanks bought second-hand from Britain. A few captured Soviet T-26S and T-28S, repaired and repainted. Against the Red Army's thousands of tanks, this is barely an inconvenience to the enemy. Then the Finns get lucky. As they push east into Soviet territory in 1941, they capture something unexpected. Not 1 or 2 tanks, not a dozen. 43 intact BT-7 fast tanks, abandoned by retreating Soviet forces. The BT-7 is part of a uniquely Soviet design philosophy. BT stands for Bystrochodny tank, or fast tank. It can drive on tracks like a normal tank, or on smooth roads, it can remove its tracks entirely and drive on its road wheels at speeds up to 53 miles per hour. It's meant to race deep into enemy territory, exploit breakthroughs, cause chaos. For Finland, these captured BT-7s are a gift. They're fast. They're reliable, at least by Soviet standards. And suddenly, Finland has more modern tanks than they've ever owned. But fast tanks aren't enough. Finland needs fire support. They need something that can blow apart Soviet bunkers, suppress infantry, destroy fortifications. The BT-7's 45mm gun is decent against light armor, but hopeless against concrete and earthworks. Finland needs a howitzer, a big one. The solution comes from the most unlikely place. Sitting in Finnish warehouses are 50 British QF 4.5-inch howitzers, not new guns. These are relics from the 1890s, designed when Finland was still part of the Russian Empire. The guns are old, but they work, and they fire a high explosive shell that weighs over 40 pounds. Perfect for demolishing defensive positions. Someone, and history doesn't record exactly who, has an idea. What if we mount the howitzer on the BT-7? Before we go on, if forgotten and impossible war machines fascinate you, subscribe to Forgotten War Relics and hit the bell so you never miss one. On paper, it's insane. The BT-7 is a light tank, weighing just over 14 tons. It's built for speed and maneuverability, with thin armor and a small turret. The QF 4.5-inch howitzer is massive, designed to be towed by horses or trucks, not mounted on a racing tank. The recoil alone could rip the turret off. But Finland is desperate, and desperation makes engineers creative. The project begins in late 1942 at the state-owned Valtion-Typi-Pajaverstys factory in Helsinki. The Finns take 18 of their captured BT-7 tanks and completely rebuild them. First, they rip off the original turret. Then they design a new one, taller and boxier to accommodate the howitzer. The new turret is welded steel, angular and crude, with barely enough room inside for the gun and its crew. The howitzer itself is modified, shortened, its breech reworked to fit the cramped interior. The result is grotesque. The BT-42 is top-heavy, ungainly, its oversized turret perched on the BT-7's low chassis like a hat on a child. The whole vehicle weighs just over 16 tons now, still light by tank standards, but the weight distribution is catastrophic. The center of gravity is so high that the tank can tip over during sharp turns. The suspension, designed for a much lighter turret, groans under the load. And then there's the ammunition problem. The QF 4.5-inch howitzer was never meant for tank warfare. It fires shells designed in the 1890s. There is no armor-piercing round. The only ammunition available is high explosive, useful against bunkers and infantry, but almost useless against enemy tanks. If a BT-42 encounters a Soviet T-34, it can throw 40-pound explosive shells at it all day. The T-34 won't even notice. Production limps forward. 18 BT-42s are completed between early 1943 and mid-year. No more are built. There aren't enough howitzers. There aren't enough BT-7 chassis in good condition. And by 1943, even the Finns are starting to suspect this idea might not have been their best. The crews call it different names. Some call it the assault tank, optimistically. Others are less kind. The turret traverse is painfully slow, hand-cranked by a sweating crewman. The gun's recoil is brutal, even with modifications. Firing the howitzer rocks the entire tank backward, and the crew inside is deafened despite padding and leather helmets. The rate of fire is abysmal, less than 4 rounds per minute in ideal conditions. In combat, half that. But the BT-42 exists. 18 of them lined up in Finnish motor pools, waiting for orders. Waiting for a battle that will prove whether this ridiculous hybrid is a stroke of genius or a tragic mistake. That battle is coming. And it will be the largest armored engagement Finland ever fights. The battle comes in June 1944. The Soviet summer offensive smashes into Finnish lines with overwhelming force. 3 armies, 500,000 men, thousands of tanks. The Finns are outnumbered 5-1. Stalin wants Finland crushed, permanently. The BT-42s roll forward to meet them. All 18 tanks are thrown into action on the Karelian Isthmus, the narrow strip of land between Lake Ladoga and the Gulf of Finland. This is where the fate of Finland will be decided. The crews know it. They climb into their Frankenstein machines, British howitzers loaded, and drive toward the sound of guns. The first engagement happens near the village of Kutuselka. A column of BT-42s encounters Soviet infantry and light armor. The high explosive shells perform exactly as designed against soft targets. Finnish reports claim several Soviet tanks destroyed, but the truth is harder to verify. In the chaos of battle, with smoke and dust obscuring everything, it's unclear whether the BT-42s are landing killing blows or simply forcing Soviet crews to abandon damaged vehicles. What is clear is this: the BT-42 cannot penetrate a T-34, not from the front, Not from the side, not at any range. The high explosive shells slam into Soviet armor and explode uselessly. Some Finnish crews try firing at close range, hoping the blast effect alone will disable enemy tanks. It doesn't work. The T-34s roll forward, firing back with 76mm guns that can punch through the BT-42's thin armor like tissue paper. One BT-42 is hit and bruised up instantly, its ammunition cooking off in a chain of explosions. Another loses its track to a Soviet anti-tank gun and is abandoned by its crew. A third takes a direct hit to the turret. The howitzer is torn from its mount and the turret crew is killed. The Finnish tank force is being systematically destroyed. By the end of June, 8 BT-42s are total losses. Nearly half the fleet, gone in 3 weeks. The survivors are pulled back from the front lines. Finnish commanders quietly admit what everyone already knows. The BT-42 is not a battle tank. It cannot fight Soviet armor. It never could. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The remaining BT-42s are reassigned. They become mobile artillery platforms, staying behind the front lines, lobbing high explosive shells at distant targets. In this role, they actually work. The British howitzer, useless against tanks, is perfectly adequate for shelling infantry positions and fortifications. The BT-42s rumble through the Finnish forests, fire a few rounds, and retreat before Soviet counter-battery fire can find them. They survive. When the Moscow Armistice is signed in September 1944, 10 BT-42s are still operational. Finland exits the war, battered but undefeated. The BT-42s are mothballed, stored in depots, maintained but never used again. They sit there for years, quietly rusting, a monument to wartime desperation. In the 1950s, Finland begins scrapping its obsolete equipment. The BT-42s are cut apart, the British howitzers removed and stored separately, the Soviet chassis sold for scrap metal. By 1960, none are left intact. 18 tanks, built from stolen parts and British guns, erased from existence, except one. A single BT-42 survives, painstakingly reconstructed in the 2000s using recovered parts and historical records. It sits now in the Parola Tank Museum in Finland, the only example left in the world. Visitors stare at it, this bizarre hybrid, trying to understand what the Finns were thinking. The answer is simple. They were thinking about survival. In 1942, Finland had no allies, no resources, and an enemy 100 times their size, preparing for round 2. So they took what they had, Soviet tank hulls captured in a previous war, British guns bought cheap, and Finnish stubbornness. They welded them together and hoped for the best. The BT-42 was never a good tank. It was too slow, too weakly armed, too lightly armored. It couldn't fight enemy tanks and it couldn't protect its crew. But it existed. And for a small nation fighting for its life, sometimes existence is enough. History remembers the T-34, the Panther, the Sherman. It forgets the BT-42, but the Finns who crewed it don't forget. They remember climbing into a machine that shouldn't have worked, that everyone said was ridiculous, and driving it into battle anyway. Because when your nation is on the edge of annihilation, you don't get to choose your weapons. You use what you have. Even if what you have is 18 stolen Soviet chassis with British howitzers bolted on top. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Forgotten War Relics for more of the strangest machines history forgot.